Hola, fourth grade. Mr. Remedies coming to you for today's mini lesson. Today we are diving into one of my favorite genres of literature. We are talking about historical fiction. Today is going to be amazing because you know what? Books are amazing. Historical fiction's amazing. I'm amazing. You're amazing. It's going to be awesome. All right. As always, we have a couple of learning goals and success criteria. Let's get to those. Our learning goal today is that we are learning to identify the characteristics of historical fiction and how they help define what historical fiction is. Okay? Some success criteria: I can determine the plot of a story and I can identify the setting of a story. All right? Those two things are very important in heading us in the right direction. All right? Let's look at some examples. All right, guys, let's take a look at some of those examples of historical fiction. Now, these examples might be familiar to you because your other fourth grade teachers have done an amazing job reading these stories to you. So we've already seen historical fiction in the Houdini box. Okay, as a reminder, Houdini box, a young man with dreams of being the next Harry Houdini meets him. Houdini's wife gives him a box with the secrets to Houdini's escapes. The young man doesn't open it until years later as an adult. Okay, a little bit of a synopsis to kind of jog your memory. Okay, we also recently read Uncle Jed's Barbershop. Okay, and hopefully this is jogging your memory. Remember, the narrator had an Uncle Jed, right, who saved up some money. Uncle Jed and the family live in the South. The story takes place during the 1920s and 1930s. It mentions the Great Depression and segregation, right? So those are key things to remember about Uncle Jed's Barbershop. And finally, we read Dad, Jackie, and Me. We've been using this story as an example for a couple of lessons now. Remember, the story takes place in 1947 and is about a young fan and his father's connection to Jackie Robinson, the first African-American player in Major League Baseball history. All three of these are considered historical fiction. Let's look and see what they have in common and see if we can't come up with a pattern, some characteristics, and maybe make some hard and fast rules about historical fiction. So here we can, using our examples, we can make some general statements, some always and some often statements about historical fiction. So historical fiction will always are imagined stories that take place in the real world. Okay, something like the Houdini box is an imagined story, but Harry Houdini was a real person. New York City is a real place. People had real trains, right? Historical fiction stories always have characters, plots, and settings. They are fictional stories. They are narrative structure. Boom. Always have those. And historical fictions always focus on problems and issues of life in the past, right? Past is history. History is about the past. So if you're reading a story and it's set in the future, warning, not historical fiction, all right? But if it does take place in the past and it is focused on problems or issues of that time period, it's a good chance that it might be historical fiction as long as it has the other two characteristics, okay? So historical fictions always are imagined stories that take place in the real world, always have characters, plots, and settings, and always focus on problems and issues of life in the past. Right? Often, though, historical fiction stories have believable characters, plots, and settings. And Mr. Remedies went over what makes a setting believable in previous mini lessons. So a historical fiction will often have believable characters, plots, and settings. Often, historical fiction stories are based on real people or events from the past. Like our example today of the Houdini box or Dad, Jackie, and Me. Those are based on real people. So those definitely qualify as historical fiction. Any of the I Survived series, boom, also qualifies because they are based on real people or events from the past. Often, historical fiction is connected to the author's own personal experience. The author of Uncle Jed's Barbershop, really did have an uncle who wanted to open their own business. Okay, although the places and the names may change, they're often connected to the author's actual experiences. Okay? And finally, historical fiction stories are often contain the language of the time and the dialogue. Okay? You're not going to see any slang that we may use today. I don't know that that in the Houdini box that any of the characters would be like, "Sup, man?" They would probably say, "Hello, sir," or "Howdy," or something like that. Okay, so often historical fiction is going to contain language of the time. They may refer to things by an old way. And so that's definitely an indicator that that story may be historical fiction. All right, guys, let's put our good thinking minds together and what sticks out about these always and often statements. Right? What do you think are the most important things that we can take from these two charts to maybe put together a definition? How about, huzzah, boom, imagine stories taking place in the real world, right? What else might be something pretty good? Bazinga, right there, coming in from the corner based on real people or events from the past, right? Always good to know. And finally, I think, huzzah, coming way downtown, historical fiction, it's very important that they focus on problems and issues of life in the past. All right? Very, very important. So from these three main points, we can come up with a really good definition of historical fiction. Okay? So let's define historical fiction. Okay? I think using our previous slide, we can come up with a real good definition. I think historical fiction stories are made-up stories that take place in the past and tell us about something in history. Boom. We did it, boys and girls. That is a wonderful definition of historical fiction. Historical fiction stories are made-up stories that take place in the past and tell about something in history. We've learned some great things today. You guys have done amazing work at your computer screens, so let's review today's lesson. We have learned that historical fiction can be defined as stories that are made up that take place in the past and tell about something in history. Right? We also learned that all historical fiction stories are made up. That's what makes them fiction. All right? Boom. There you go. But you guys knew what fiction meant. All right? All historical fiction stories made up. All historical fiction stories occur in the past. That makes a whole lot of sense because history is the study of the past. Some can't be historical fiction if it takes place in modern times or in the future. So, right? Historical fiction, always in the past. All right? All historical fiction stories take place in the real world because they're usually based on a real event, person, or occurrence. They're going to take place in the real world and be believable. All right? And finally, historical fiction stories often contain real people or events. Like Dad, Jackie, and me. Jackie Robinson was an incredibly real person, an incredibly important person, but I doubt that Jackie Robinson really threw a baseball to the narrator's dad. Or Houdini did not give the little box to the narrator. Okay, it's based on a true story, but didn't really do that. Okay, but Harry Houdini, real person, real person. All right. So let's keep those things in mind. Historical fiction, one of my favorite genres. I love the I Survive series. I love the Houdini box. Man, I can't begin. Look at my face. I love it. I hope you guys do too. And this has been Historical Fiction Mini Lesson. I've been Mr. Remedies. We'll see you soon.